Hey, good evening, good evening, good evening, man. I just want to welcome you guys back to the Conversation 98, and I'm so happy that we're back on here again. Another week, another episode, and apologies for the delays today. Don't know what was going on. Took a little bit while to come on, but we here right now, man, and I'm so excited to be back and looking forward to the conversation for tonight because it's been a while. But not only been a while, I really think the topic tonight is going to be a very interesting and thought provoking topic, one that I think that's very necessary to discuss. So that's what we got going on. So I just wanted to just say that before we get started and thank everybody, man. I appreciate you. We've been going strong, been rocking strong for a long time. So make sure you share this. Let people know that it's interactive. Let me know that you hear what you got going on, and I look forward to hearing your comments. Look forward to hearing what you got going on. But we're gonna get right into it, man. I'm excited tonight. Tonight is something that's very special. Took some time off last week to take some me time, man. I took some vacation time, and I'm excited about that. Sometimes you got to do that. You got to get out. You got to do something for yourself, and you always looking out for other people. Sometimes you just got to do something for you. That's what you got to do. So that's what I got, and that's what I look forward to. But again, thank you guys so much for your continued support. I really appreciate it. It does means a lot. It does means a lot to me, and I'm sharing this. I'm gonna share this with a few more people, and then I'm getting going. We're gonna get right into it. We won't be before you long tonight. But make sure you comment. Let me know where you're watching from, and if you got anything you want to add, feel free to do that. But we're gonna get right into the conversation for tonight. And the conversation for tonight is just because you did the best you could, that doesn't mean that it was the right thing to do. And I know sometimes that can be a hard pill to swallow. And this is not an attempt to knock whatever the effort that it was, or this is not to discredit the genuine nation or behind your intentions. But just because you did the best you could, that doesn't automatically mean that it was the right thing to do. And a lot of people are dealing with that. A lot of people have to carry that because a lot of people feel like, especially when they're talking about relationships and hurt or things that has transpired in different type of relationships, people feel like just because they did the best they could, that it was the right thing to do. And that can be disrespectful or even more hurtful to the person that on the other side had a different experience from that. And it's just, that's why I wanted to talk about it, because we have to get to a space where we can acknowledge that even though I did my best, that doesn't mean that it was the right thing or how it impacted somebody else. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I really wanted to get to, because I was sitting down thinking about, man, what I was going to talk about this week. And that's something that came up because, a lot of times, people intentions are good, man, but that doesn't mean that just because your intentions good don't mean that you ain't hurt nobody. People have great intentions. There are a lot of things that people do with the best of intentions, and they give 100% the best. And in life, and many times, your best is all what's required. But I want us to acknowledge and accept the fact that just because you did your best doesn't mean that it was the right thing or the outcome came out to be the right thing, or especially how it impacted others. And your efforts could have been genuine, but how it impacted others. And a lot of times, especially, and I know I can say this, especially with parents and children, a lot of times the parents feel like they feel they get defensive because they know that they gave their best to their children. And I'm not talking about somebody being ungrateful, but I'm talking about you may have done the best you could. But just because you did the best you could doesn't mean that it didn't hurt somebody else. That didn't mean that it didn't disappoint somebody else. Doesn't mean that it didn't cause some trauma to somebody else. And we have to be willing to acknowledge and accept it. We just have to be willing to acknowledge and accept it. I am not saying that you got to acknowledge that you did wrong. I'm not saying that. That's not what I'm talking about. And I don't want nobody to feel that way, because sometimes people can feel that way. But when you can acknowledge that you did something out of a genuine place and out of your best effort, but you can also acknowledge that just because you did that, you can acknowledge that the outcome may not have been good, or it may have hurt somebody or impacted somebody else differently. And I know a lot of times we try to correlate our intentions with outcomes. And when we try to correlate our intentions with outcomes, that can be a dangerous thing, especially in relationships. You can have the best intentions in the world to do something for your spouse or to do something for your kids or to do something for a loved one. But that does not mean just because you gave your best and your intention was the best, that they experienced that for the best of you. And I want us to really understand that, because many of us, we feel like that they should just accept that. No, they shouldn't dismiss their experience of what you did for them just because you said you gave your best. You can acknowledge you gave your best, but you can also acknowledge that they may not have experienced it that way. My mom said our best at a particular time doesn't mean it was the best. That is true. And I want to it also doesn't mean we are a bad person. Yes. And that's I was just about to. I'm glad you said that, Mom, because I was just about to discuss that, because I know sometimes it can seem that way, but just because you did your best and the outcome wasn't favorable to somebody else, or it didn't come out the way that you probably thought it would have been, that doesn't mean that you're a bad person. That's just acknowledging the reality of life. You know, good intentions, good having the best intentions in the world does not mean, and doing things from a genuine place does not mean that things will always be favorable, come out favorable on the other end. And it's okay. But that doesn't also mean that if it doesn't, that also does not mean that if it comes out unfavorable, that you're a bad person. No, some situations, circumstances dictate that we make certain decisions, and we make the best decisions in those moments. But we also have to acknowledge the best decisions in those moments. A decision can have later on impacts, secondary and tertiary impacts later down the line. And we have to be willing to acknowledge it. We just have to be willing to acknowledge it. And that's one of the best things, some of the best advice I can give on that aspect. But, sometimes we just feel like, and I would tell you a lot of, and this is a God and His truth, but a lot of people are wounded because people feel like there's a lot of parents that feel like, well, I did my best for you. Nobody's arguing the fact that you didn't do your best, but your best caused some issues with some people. And your refusal to take ownership that it did is really hurting those people, the same people that you claiming that you did your best for. All because you too afraid to just acknowledge the fact that, dang, my best was my best at that moment, but that didn't mean that they had a positive experience from it. Yeah, you gave them the best you had. And I'm not asking you to apologize for that or making an excuse for that. But sometimes we have to realize our best in those moments, in our low moments, in our high moments, the best in those moments was it's not always the what was best for that situation. Sometimes we just on survival mode. We're just trying to survive. And we are giving people the best what's left over of us. And we have to be able to acknowledge that and know that that can sometimes hurt those people closest to us. We have to be able to acknowledge that. And I don't understand. A lot of people try to push that off on people and avoid the accountability of it. But we have to be able to acknowledge that, because acknowledging that really goes a long way into people really healing, or people really getting to the bottom of things and growing and really healing. That's really what it really boils down to, healing. Because so many people are walking around wounded. I mean, and it's just a reality, but there's a lot of people that are walking wounded simply because they are dealing with people who, in their mind, they did the best that they could, and they refuse to acknowledge the fact that them doing their best still caused some impact or still caused some hurt, harm, or pain for that person. And they don't want to acknowledge it because they feel like, oh, well, my best, me giving you my best was good enough. And I'm not being dismissive of somebody's genuine effort, but sometimes we got to acknowledge, man, that sometimes as a father, I fail. That sometimes as a spouse, I fail. That sometimes as a son, I fail. And I can be giving my best effort, but I just may have been out of pocket in that moment. And I can go back and acknowledge that, and I can go back and take ownership that and recognize that, hey, this may not have been my best in that moment. And I can take ownership of my actions and still say you got the best of me, but the best of me in that moment was not what the best I could do. And I think that's a problem that hurts a lot of people. And you're right, Ant. You said no one could be right all the time, but experience is a good teacher. And my mom said, hey, even the best BS is still BS. Yes. And then this is the thing. And I want people to really understand this, and I want people to acknowledge it because it's going to help some people. You know, stop trying to argue that you gave your best, but the best that you gave was from a hurtful place. The best that you gave was from a wounded you. The best that you gave was from a depleted you. Yes, you still gave your best, but it wasn't from the best version of yourself. And so many of us, we are trying to argue the point that we gave our best. Yes, we did. That is factual. You gave your very best, but your very best was from the lowest parts of you, was from when you was at your lowest. So we have to acknowledge that even though you gave your best, that still doesn't take away from the fact that where you gave your best from. And many people have been impacted by that. And many of us are refused to acknowledge that because we want to hide behind the banner of, hey, I gave you my best. But just because I gave you my best, that does not mean that it was the right thing. And many of us, we are passing on contaminated best to people because we was hurt when we gave it to them. Ant said they're wounded because they didn't take care of their own accountability in their own hurt. And my mom said I like that the best of me at a particular time may not have been the best of who we are. Yes, that is so true. And I just want us to really dissect that because, you know, that's why I'm a big, huge advocate of you know, people going back, especially parents and child relationship, because I've seen it. When you talk about long-term relationship, like seriously going back and having those conversations, seriously going back and talking, seriously going back and having those discussions and working through things. Because, man, I know there's some people, man, you know, there's some people that really gone through it, man. They're gone through it. But if you are a parent or if you are a parental figure and you did something or you made decisions that involve your children, and it may have been the best decision in that moment, but that decision caused a lot of heartache and pain for your kids because it may have involved separations, it may have involved somebody else raising your kids, but it was for the best interest of the kid. You have to be able to take ownership of that, but also realize that just because it was the best decision in that moment, it didn't have an impact on those kids. So if you go to them and your approach to them is that, hey, I did what's best for you, and you never take ownership and acknowledge that hurt them, then you are doing more damage than what you think. And you can try to stand on your great intentions all you want to. That still will never take away from the fact that those kids were hurt by you making the best decision in that moment. And you owe it to them to make it right. You owe it to them to make it right. And making it right in that moment, it's not you going back and try to explain it. No, making it right is just taking ownership of acknowledging that what you did hurt them. And I don't want people to understand this. And I want us to walk on this and talk on this for a little bit. But making it right, when you talk about reconciliation, if you've hurt somebody in a situation, reconciliation does not mean that you have to go back and you have to change, because you can't go back and change what happened. But reconciliation is taking ownership of the part and the role that you played. You cannot change how something, you cannot control how something hurt somebody else. You cannot control how it impacted them. But what you can do is you can take accountability for ownership of the role you played in it. And then sit down and try to figure out and listen to how it impacted the person. And then if the opportunity is there, then you can have an open dialogue and an open conversation on the whys behind it. Because sometimes people healing is in understanding that, dang, they made the best decision in that moment. And knowing that now that can help them get on the road to healing just because you sat down, took accountability, and you worked towards gaining an understanding. Ant said, I've been hurt so that as experience may help someone, but at the same time, at the same breath, my experience can't help or heal someone else. Yeah, that's so true. And listen, I want people to understand this is not a sad thing or woe is me or the end of the world type thing. Nah, I am speaking towards this is a reality that a lot of people deal with, but not a lot of people talking about. A lot of people deal with this, but they are not talking about it. They are not discussing it. They are and it impacts them on a personal level. And they have gotten to the point to where they moved on and they got to a space to where they are surviving, and they've gotten to a space to where they are able to manage it better because it really was impacted them. But a lot of healing and a lot of restoration can come if people simply just say, you know what? I can acknowledge that the best that I gave you at that time may have not been the right thing for you, but I still gave you my best. But I'm owning the fact that I know and I recognize that me giving you my best still did cause you some hurt or pain. And that's all what I'm speaking about. That right there is all what I'm speaking about, because many people go through it. Many people deal with it. Many people are dealing with that today. And some things about it too is, and this is not, and I want people to understand this, and I want us to really understand this, but taking accountability for your actions does not mean you have to take on the ownership of the pain of somebody else, even though your actions may have been the cause or the root cause of somebody else's pain, because you can only take ownership of the things you've done. You cannot take ownership of how they process it or what they deal with it. And I don't want people to feel like you have become responsible for taking the pain away from somebody else. No, what you can do is you can acknowledge that, hey, what I probably did, I did it out of my best, the best that I gave you my best, but I acknowledge that the best that I gave you, that I can acknowledge that this is how this impacted you. Because I can acknowledge that this is how this impacted you, I'm taking full ownership of the role that I played. I am not responsible for that other person to go on their healing journey, but I would eliminate any barriers that I may have been to them achieving or walking towards their own healing. That is what I'm talking about. I'm not trying to ask us, because even though, and I want people to really understand this, because I know this can be a hard thing, but it can be a hard thing to really accept. But even though you may have hurt somebody, you may have done something to hurt somebody. And like I said, just because you did your best, that doesn't mean that what you did was right. You may have done something the best that you could. And the best that you could can end up being, in the long run, something that was not the right thing to do or cause harm to somebody. Just because that happened, you can take ownership of, dang, that, yeah, what I did was the best, but I also fully take ownership of how that impacted you, how that hurt you, and how that have had an impact on your life. But you can never take responsibility of the other person hurt, because some people will only look for other people to try to blame other people for they hurt, because they refuse to deal with it, because a lot of them identify by that pain and they want sympathy for it, and they don't want to move forward and grow from that. So don't try to act like don't try to carry the burden of somebody else's pain. That's on them. That is on them, because this is and this is something. The thing that really has been big with me on this topic is I'm talking about relationships with parents and kids. Relationships with parents and kids. This can happen in any type of relationship, but relationship with parents and kids. There are a lot of people. I would say this. There are a lot of relationships with parents and kids that the parents in the situation did the best that they could. They may have given them up for adoption. They may have left them with somebody. They may have abandoned them. They may have done something. And in their mind, that was the best thing that they could do. It was the best thing for them to do it. And they may have went by doing it the wrong way. But in that moment, they did what they felt was best for their child. Yes, you did that. But that still doesn't mean just because you did that, it didn't have a negative impact on that child, or it didn't impact that child in a negative way. Even though they may have went to a loving environment, even though they may have went to something that was the best situation for them, that still will have an impact for them. The thing I'm speaking on is you can acknowledge and take full acknowledgement that just because you made that decision, you can acknowledge that that decision had an impact on the other person. And don't try to use the fact that you did your best for them and try to act like that should just be suffice, because it's not. It's not. It is 100% not. It's not suffice, because it is really disrespectful to it. Because I want us, and it's almost like this, Mama said this. Some people are prideful of their victim status. Oh yeah. Listen, and I want people to understand. I want people to really understand this and walk in this. And this is to people that are perpetual offenders of this. But the world does not care that you wear victimhood as a badge of honor. The world is not going to stop. The world is not going to feel sorry for you. You can sit around all you want to. Yeah, your daddy wasn't there. Yeah, your mama wasn't there. Yeah, the situations and circumstances was not ideal. But that has nothing to do with the fact that you're making destructive decisions and you are having to live with the consequences of your decisions. And the parents in those situations, stop making yourself feel accountable for your kids making bad decisions. Yeah, you may have made a bad choice or situation of how they grew up, but you can take ownership and acknowledge that. But they can't sit around and try to blame you. Stop wasting your life trying to blame your life on somebody else just because you are too prideful and too stupid to sit around and take ownership. Because every decision and choice you make, you're going to have to live with those consequences. You are. My mom said my grandmother gave my father up for adoption. And my dad said it was the best decision for him. But it took years for him to work through what happened to him. Yes, and Mama, I'm glad that you shared that. And this is what I'm talking about. And I want people to really understand this so that they can gain an understanding on why what I'm speaking on is important. My great grandmother gave up my grandfather because my grandfather's stepdad was abusive. So my grandmother knew that, hey, it was the best thing to do to get him out of that situation. So she gave him up to my adoptive great grandparents, little mama and players, and who couldn't have kids. And they raised my granddaddy in a very loving and nurturing environment. That was the best decision for him, but that still had an impact on him, on his mother giving him up. And that's what I'm speaking on. Just because they did what's best, that doesn't mean that it was the right thing. That doesn't mean that it didn't impact him. It had an impact on him, but what he did was my grandfather did the work to reconcile. And I grew up knowing who my great grandmother was because he did the work to reconcile. And it took him years to gain an understanding that she did what was best, but it still had an impact on him for many years. That is what I'm speaking on. That is what I'm talking about in these situations. But the problem, one of the things about it was my great grandmother never sat around and act like, well, I did what's best for you. No, she acknowledged that, hey, in the situation, I gave you up because it was for your best interest and for your safety. Because I was in the situation, I was in the bad situation. I put you in the bad situation. You see what I'm saying? And so many of us, and my mama said this, and when he finally found her, she acknowledged that she did it to save him. Now think about the healing that came from that. But that still didn't take away from the fact that you have to deal with the fact that your mama gave you up. Think about that. And that's what I'm speaking on. So many of us, there's so many things that, yes, you may have done what's best, but don't sit around and just because you acknowledge that you did your best, try to be dismissive of somebody else's experience from the decision you made. Hey, man, thanks, Leandro. Appreciate it, bro. Appreciate it. I appreciate that. But yeah, man, I really want people to understand that, because it is so many wounded. I mean, it's so many people been carrying this thing for a long time in silence, because they have been wounded by people that they're close to and they love, and the person that they're close to and love still haven't dealt with the wound and the hurt that caused them to make those decisions that they made. And they are afraid to acknowledge and take ownership of it because they just suppress theirs. And that's why it's so important for us to heal. Listen, I want us to really understand this and really take this for what it is. But it is so important for us to heal, because when if I'm wounded and I don't deal with my wounds, I will pass that on to my kids. You see what I'm saying? And that's why generational curses and things pass on. Yes, you may not have caused that pain, but that's why it's so important to heal and get to the bottom of things and start asking those tough questions instead of just saying, I'm good, and suppressing it and moving on. That's why you're having problems in your relationship. That's why you can't really build those strong bonds that you're seeking, because you're not willing to address that. Hey, that really hurt me. What somebody did, that really hurt me. And then sometimes with dealing with that, you got to be willing to allow that wound to open up just a little bit, just so that you can gain an understanding. And in that understanding, what you'll start to find out is, hey, that person did the best they could in that moment. Now I realize that, yeah, I know that still hurt me, but I can acknowledge that they did what's best, and that helped me on my healing journey. I'm just telling you, that will help me on my healing journey. So it's so many of us, and I want us to really lock in. And if you're dealing with that, if you're dealing with those things, or you struggle with this, if this have caused you some hurt, pain, and thing, I'm not trying to destroy your world. That's not what I'm talking about. But I am speaking on the fact that the importance of us getting to a space to where we are healing. Getting to a space to where we're healing. My mom said my dad and grandmother learned to talk about it in a joking manner. Listen, I'm finna tell you this about that man named Charles Brown. I got to tell you this because growing up, I didn't realize how much I was learning from my granddaddy. But I said earlier, and I want people to understand this. I said this, and this is the power. I want us to understand the power of healing. When you take the time to heal and heal from your trauma, it will put you in positions, and it will change your hearts that will change lives around you. My grandfather, like I said, was given up for adoption because his stepdad was abusive to him, to the point to where he used to take his food and give it to dogs. And my granddaddy said he used to sleep under the house on bales of hay just to feel safe. My grandmother gave him up for adoption. My grandfather went through that, ended up finding my grandmother later, and they rekindled and gained an understanding about that. And he understood that she did that to save him. But yet and still, he still had to go on a healing journey, to the point to where the same guy, his stepdad that was abusive, my grandfather wouldn't allow him to be put in a nursing home and took him into his own home and took care of him while in his old age. Now, I would say that was God, because I'm telling you right now, it was a bit hard for me, but healing would give you the heart to do that. Healing would give you the heart to do those things for those that's mistreated you. And there's no way that he could have done that if he didn't put in the work to work towards his healing. Yes, you still got other things. You're still going to have other things that you're going to have to manage. You're still going to have other things that you're going to deal with. There's going to be a part of life, and I got it. Nobody is going to be perfect. You're going to have your vices. You're going to have those things. Everybody has them. But to see that in action, it really gave me something to look at and just be like, dang. That's crazy. Because for me, that's something to celebrate. But I didn't really understand it until later on. The importance of it. And that's why I'm speaking on it now. You know, some of us we are, man, thank you, God. Listen, man. Some of us are one reconciliation away from our breakthrough. And that reconciliation comes when we are willing to seek and gain an understanding instead of try to point blame somebody else for it. Because the thing that I've learned about God is that when we talk about the grace of God, you begin to look at yourself and the decisions that you make. And I say this, it's easy for me to judge my parents or judge somebody else before I was in that situation. It's easy to have an opinion about something you never had the responsibility for. So now when you seek to gain an understanding and you gain an understanding, and a lot of times what you'll find out was that your parents or whoever was, they're human. And they made the best decision that they had based off the circumstance. And in that, you're gaining understanding that a lot of reconciliation and a lot of healing can come from. Because you've been running through all the scenarios in your head, and the scenarios in your head are just based off of your own inputs, not the reality of what happened. And that reconciliation can come from there. I would just tell you, man, I really hope tonight was helpful for somebody. I really hope tonight was this information was good for somebody, because I was thinking about this, and it was just something that was just heavy on my heart to talk about. You know, this is the stuff that people don't talk about. You know, this is the stuff, like I always say, Aunt said, think about kids that go through divorce. Kids take things hard and can't understand the situation their parents went through. That's true. And then the parents, you know, in those situations, the parents got to sit down and have those conversations with those kids, man. You got to sit down and have those conversations with those kids and not just think that they are going to be okay. No, have those conversations and be honest. I mean, be honest. What I mean by just simply be honest. Don't sit there and try to blame the other person. Take full ownership of the role you played into the marriage dissolving, and have that conversation with your kids. Because there are so many people and kids. There are so many people and kids that struggle in their own relationships because they have the very same characteristics that you have in relationship, but you never talk to them about it. And they feel like that they're isolated, and they're like, man, why is this? But then if you sit down and have a conversation with your mama or your dad, and they say, hey, this is why it didn't work, because I didn't do this and I didn't do that, I will tell you that a lot of people will be healed, and a lot of relationships will be a whole lot better. They'll be a whole lot better. So, man, thank you guys so much for rocking with your boy, man. Make sure you go and you check out all of my social media platforms, the Conversation 98 on YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe there. Also on here, the Conversation 98. I'm on TikTok, the Conversation _98, and Twitter and Instagram, the Conversation 98. Make sure y'all go and subscribe and share this. And man, please thank y'all for the follow. I look forward to having a conversation. We continue to put out this content. And hey, we've been going strong with episode 189. We've 189 episodes from when God told me to start. So we're going to continue to go strong. And I appreciate those that have been rocking with me. Appreciate the input. Love you guys. You guys have a blessed and wonderful week. God bless.